The US debt crisis is just getting worse. And honestly, I don't know what you want to call it. Greed, corruption, mismanagement, call it whatever you want. But as I've covered in my Great Melt-Up series, the government's debt crisis and all the money printing will cause the US dollar to lose its reserve currency status. So I just want to be very clear about this.
Welcome to Pegasus versus the World, where we take on challenges, comedy, trending topics, and some travel.
City boy! City boy!
All right, man. The homie over here at Clear Value Tax? Yeah, Clear Value Tax. He drops gems. So let's rock and see what he has to say. He's very neutral in the way he approaches things, and it's just about stats, statistics, history, numbers, and it said U.S. debt crisis worsens after Trump's bill passes. And I'm just curious about all this. You know, you have two sides of the argument for the big, beautiful bill. You hear people saying that Trump is planning on a bunch of growth and bringing back a bunch of things to America, which will cause growth. And this is why they're spending more than what I believe they should. And then you have people that are just like, yo, they're spending too much. We're at a deficit. When are we ever going to look at the deficit and try to make the dollar valuable again? So let's just see what a professional, an expert has to say. Because I really, I hear certain things and I just try to take a logical, common sense approach because that's all I have. I'm not like I didn't go to college. I'm not super well read. I just, I've always kind of just had a good way. So my thing, I've always hustled. I've always created resources and I've always known how to connect people or connect the dots with certain things. And that's how I've been successful in life in general and taking a common sense, somewhat logical approach to things. So let's see what's going on here. And, yeah.
The US debt crisis is just getting worse. And honestly, I don't know what you want to call it. Greed, corruption, mismanagement, call it whatever you want. But as I've covered in my Great Melt-Up series, the government's debt crisis and all the money printing will cause the US dollar to lose its reserve currency status. So I just want to be very clear about this. People will continue to use the US dollar for transactions. However, it's not going to be the reserve assets of the world. And de-dollarization, it's a process. It's not an event. In today's video, we're focusing on President Trump's one big beautiful bill, which has now been signed into law. So unfortunately, this bill...
Before we get into this on record, for anyone who's watching this with me, just know this dude, he's not a Trump hater either. Like, he's pretty logical and neutral. But there have been moments where I've seen videos of his. I personally think that he likes Trump. So, but I hear his tonality just a little bit here, and he's like, unfortunately, like, I'm like, oh, let me just throw this in there because a lot of people will just, jump ship either way, right? Oh, it's a video about Trump. I can't watch this. I hate Trump. Oh, this person's hating on Trump. F them. I can't listen to them. And then everything gets lost in the sauce because we can't really just hear, like, these neutral perspectives on what's going on. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Going to make the debt crisis even worse. And rather than trying in Trump's one big beautiful bill, which has now been signed into law. So unfortunately, this bill is going to make the debt crisis even worse. And rather than trying to solve the problem, basically the politicians are adding fuel to the fire. And I want to show you. Now, I just want to start with this. I know that some people are very happy about certain items within this bill. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, among other things. And if you qualify to take advantage of those things, then I'm very happy for you. However, you have to realize that overall, this is just going to make the situation worse. It's like dropping quarters to pick up pennies. So let me explain. The best way I can put it is just think about the last stimulus package, okay? Was a $1,200 stimulus check worth it in exchange for how much the cost of housing, food, insurance, how everything just skyrocketed up? And I would say, well, it's just my opinion. I would say no. We got the crumbs and we got stuck with the cost of living inflation.
You guys, just listen to what he said real quick. I don't think there's anyone who's watching this channel who could dispute what he just said. Was a $1,200 stimulus check worth the cost of food going up, house prices, everything went up, everything, and it's still up to this day. So $1,200 That could last someone 2 weeks in America for something that's stretched out to we're in 2025 right now. So the absolute answer is no. But I think the critical question is, I think it was the CARES Act. That's what Trump signed. And then Biden got in, and I forgot what he signed. And so they just keep adding to this. But I remember when the CARES Act was about to get signed, there was all this argument because there was all this nonsense in there. Yeah, that we're giving out the $1,200 stimulus checks, but there was all this BS, foreign aid, this, that, the other. They wrap all this stuff in these bills, and the shit increases the deficit. And that's the one thing, when people, I don't know if they're allowed to tell you their strategy or what, but I forget the numbers exactly, but I know Trump during his first term, he didn't decrease the deficit. We weren't at a break-even point. Biden definitely didn't decrease it. And now we're at a point where I thought the goal was decrease the deficit, and that helps make the dollar more powerful. You guys let me know in the comments. That's my very simple way of seeing it. So maybe it's not that simple. Maybe it's a little more complex, but, we'll see where all this goes.
And the uber wealthy people, they got the whole pie, and they benefited from financial asset inflation. Now, this one big beautiful bill is just more of the same thing. So the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, says that this one big beautiful bill is going to add $3.4 trillion to the deficit over the next 10 years, which I've outlined in red. Now, I want to tell you this. If you're thinking, okay, $3.4 trillion added to the deficit over the next 10 years, that's going to break down to $340 billion more deficit per year, which is bad, but that's not horrible, relatively speaking. But the thing is, this deficit, it's front-loaded. So look at next year, 2026. This bill is expected to add $500 billion to our deficit next year. That is huge. And take a look at 2027. It's going to add over $600 billion to our deficit that year. And it's not going to be much better in 2028. Now, I want to show you this video clip of Senator Rand Paul, who's a Republican, speaking out against this one big beautiful bill. So please take a look.
So, the big, not so beautiful bill is passed now. The one thing that's for certain is that next year the deficit will be bigger than this year. The bill includes over $500 billion in new spending, and at the end, to get the vote of the Alaska senator, billions and billions and billions more were added. At least $50 billion was added for hospital fund in the end. We don't have any of that money. All of it's borrowed. All of that spending will have to be borrowed, and this bill will lead to a much greater deficit over time, and I don't believe it's fiscally responsible.
Now, I want to show you this. The federal government...
I personally like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie. I'm just going to put that out there for you guys who want to roast me. I don't really care. I personally think most I don't agree with everything, but most of their stuff is pretty logical, kind of old school, like, hey, let's try to get the deficit under control. Let's do this, that, and the other. We'll see how this plays out, We're going to see. But since I've been tracking this stuff, and starting to go over, even in 2020, I was like, because I was watching certain things, I started getting ready for inflation and stuff like that. And then the inflation came in certain things, so I was prepared for it. So that's always been good. I'm not an expert like this dude or a lot of people, but I don't know. I've always liked Rand Paul and Thomas Massie. I thought they were on point.
Government is now in debt for $37 trillion, and this doesn't even include the unfunded liabilities. Okay, so here's what's going to happen this year. The U.S. government's going to collect about $5 trillion in taxes, and the U.S. government's going to spend about $7 trillion, which means that the government's going to borrow the $2 trillion difference. In other words, the government's going to go deeper into debt by $2 trillion this year. And now with the passage of this bill, the situation is just going to get worse next year. And as the government accumulates more debt, then the government's going to have to pay more in interest. And that's going to mean more of our tax dollars going to be spent on interest rather than other productive things, education, healthcare, etc. So those orange segments, they show how much more interest that we're going to be paying each year because of the passage of this bill. So it may not seem like a huge impact, but you have to remember that this is just from a single bill. I mean, what else is the government going to have to borrow money for in the future? If there's a recession, then we're going to have to borrow money to spend on stimulus. If there's financial problems, then we're going to have to spend money on bailouts. If there's a war, that costs money too. Now, to be fair, I want to show you this. President Trump and the White House are saying that this one big beautiful bill will decrease the deficit, decrease the national debt, and will unleash economic growth.
That's what I was talking about at the beginning. Their premise for this bill is they're counting on growth. And with that growth, essentially, they believe they will bring down the deficit. But like he's kind of saying it's front loaded. And I don't know. I honestly don't know how this is going to play out. That's why I watch this type of stuff. I'll just keep watching stuff and then, kind of go figure out some things I don't figure out. I'm just, try to be prepared for things that could potentially happen.
I'm not convinced, but that's just my opinion, and this is their opinion. But then this begs the question, if this bill is going to decrease the deficit and the national debt, then why does this one big beautiful bill need to raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion? I would say that just common sense and realistically speaking is because everybody knows that this bill is not going to decrease the deficit or the national debt. Now, I know that people are going to say that Trump's tariffs are bringing in a lot of money. So I'm showing you this to give you the full picture. And it is true. Trump's tariffs are bringing in more money, as you can clearly see. So this is a monthly chart of tariff revenue for the US governments. And it has spiked up. So for the month of June, the US government collected $28 billion in tariff revenue. And I agree, that is a lot. At that rate, it's $336 billion a year.
Where are we with the consensus on tariffs? Do we think they're working or do we not? I'm curious in the comments. Tap in with your boy.
But you have to remember that the US government's going to spend $7 trillion this year. So $336 billion of tariff revenue, if that happens, that is only 4.8% of what the government spends. And you have to remember that the deficit this year is going to be $2 trillion. And this bill is expected to increase the deficit by $500 billion next year, and that's according to the CBO. And again, to give you the full picture, the big money-saving promises of Doge, that's clearly dead. So this is from the official Doge website. This is on the US government's website. So Doge claims to have saved $190 billion. But you have to keep in mind that this is the estimated savings over the course of the next 10 years because it includes long-term contracts and leases. So this is not the savings amounts for 2025. So essentially, if you take their word for how much they've saved us, which has already been proven to be incorrect, they have saved $19 billion for us this year. So $19 billion, that's what the federal government spends in 24 hours. Like literally, that's $7 trillion divided by 365 days. And the real numbers speak for themselves. So for fiscal year 2025, which is the light purple line, the federal government has already overspent by $1.36 trillion up until May. So that is a bigger deficit than fiscal year 2024, when it was at $1.2 trillion by May. So yes, the deficit in 2025 is worse this year compared to last year. So listen, it's my expectation that this big, beautiful bill is just going to make the fiscal situation worse. More borrowing, more debt, more money printing, and further loss of confidence in the US dollar. And this is just going to accelerate the de-dollarization process, which is the world walking away from the US dollar. And just so you know, everything that I'm saying is right in front of us. Like, this isn't a conspiracy theory, it's not imagination running wild. The dollar has been weakening, and it's had a terrible 2025, the worst year this year in the past 50 years. Central banks around the world are also loading up on gold, and they're using fewer dollars as a percentage of their reserves. Okay, so that's your...
They're also loading up on Bitcoin. They're starting to make a transfer to cryptocurrency slowly but surely. I'll talk about that after he finishes this piece.
In the past 50 years. Central banks around the world are also loading up on gold, and they're using fewer dollars as a percentage of their reserves. Okay, so that's your latest update on the fiscal situation, and please subscribe because I'm going to be keeping you up to date on this whole de-dollarization process and just the shift to the new monetary system, because this is wild. Like, everything's going to change. Of course, it's going to be disruptive. Thank you so much. Please subscribe, and I wish you a very nice day. Take care.
Damn, I don't think I've seen him that distressed before. You see how he still doesn't really have that much emotion in his facial expressions, but he kind of stressed out about this one. Look, man, the dollar, I don't know how this is all going to play out. You know, I was leery on the tariff situation, and I'm like, it doesn't seem as bad as I thought and as people were saying, but they're about to drop tariffs. I think there's some tariffs about to go in place pretty soon. I don't know if it's in August 1st or something, maybe on the EU and where else? Oh, man, I forget. But so we're going to see how all this stuff plays out. But I like to track it to try to learn. I did see a thing, and you guys can tap in about this because I don't know much about it yet. But cryptocurrency is starting to become a player more and more. You know, people are buying into this gold. Crypto was at an all-time high yesterday. I think it hit 118,000, almost got to 120, which is great for my Bitcoin wallet. But some of the things I heard was once de-dollarization really happens, there's potential that I don't know if Bitcoin would be what it would be called, but it's through stable coins, using cryptocurrency, and governments starting to use stable coins, and they're starting to utilize like crypto as the new the concept of the US dollar. So I don't know how that's going to play out, or how, I don't know what's going to happen, but that's what they're talking about. There's a lot going on. It's hard to predict all these things. We have a lot of world events going on with, the escalation of wars, pandemics, economic factors. There's just a bunch of things. I wouldn't get wrapped up into it too much. I think being aware of it and trying to be prepared is great, but don't let it ruin your life. This is interesting. I thought this was a good one to watch and just to learn. So you guys let me know what you're thinking in the comments. I'd love to hear it, and we'll see what's next.
City boy, city boy.